The object of this course is simple.
Punishment Park is the type of film that gets censored.
You must evade capture by the pursuing law enforcement officers and reach the flag by the appointed time.
However, when it was released in 1971, it played for 4 days in New York, 10 days in San Francisco, and was then buried for 30 years. Which is honestly the most shocking part of the story. And it should concern you more than the prospect of actual censorship. Because censorship is visible. There's something there that they're afraid of.
And are you or are you not a communist?
Hey man, I'll answer that motherfucking question.
But Punishment Park didn't do any of that. When it was released, it was watched.
You think my language is immoral?
Processed.
Ethan, what do you call that shit you just did, man?
And then forgotten.
What do you call this shit here?
Peter Watkins made Punishment Park over 50 years ago, but I would argue that what happened to it makes it the most accurate prediction of how uncomfortable truths and how awkward news is managed in the modern world.
I would tell the truth.
You could have a better country than
I would
you're
tell the
living
story
in
of
right
black
now.
people like it has never been told in this country, because you never tell it, because they never tell it.
You see, we don't suppress uncomfortable issues anymore. We watch, we listen, we might even post the odd comment, but pretty soon, we move on.
Because the fruit growers ain't gonna tell it, and it's either they or members of their club who buys the time on that television set.
Punishment Park predicted the most powerful weapon that modern media uses against us.
I would tell what happened to people who are poor,
Our own attention span.
and uneducated, and automated out of a job, and who stand in long fucking lines talking to little people like you with delusions of power, and you gotta
Watch your language, there's a lady in a court.
Where?
Peter Watkins was a British filmmaker who'd already made the BBC deeply uncomfortable with his excellent 1965 film, The War Game, a mock documentary about nuclear war on British soil. It won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 1966, after the BBC had buried it. The BBC didn't even submit it. That's how incendiary it was. And that's how good it still is. You might think that that would have taught Watkins something. Instead, it showed him that the pseudo-documentary format was a real weapon. And so, he increased the caliber.
The shootings at Kent State University in Ohio of 4 students in May 1970 were certainly the turning point which made me decide to make an independent film about what was happening in the United States at that time.
The thing that lit Watkins up was the presence of the camera. Specifically, it was the realization that the camera had stopped protecting anyone. At the 1968 Democratic Convention, when the police waded into the crowd with batons, the protesters chanted. They believed that because it was being documented, that they'd be safe, that the presence of the cameras were enough. They believed that if something was witnessed and recorded, it couldn't simply be ignored. But the tragedy was, they were wrong. The whole world was watching, and it made no difference at all. Watkins built Punishment Park around that misapprehension.
Under the provisions of Title II of the 1950 Internal Security Act.
And also during this time, I came across the anti-communist McCarran Act.
Persons apprehended shall be given a hearing without right of bail, without the necessity of evidence.
This draconic US legislation provided for the setting up of places of detention, in effect concentration camps,
and shall then be confined to places of detention.
for those accused of subversion by the government.
The President is then authorized to apprehend and detain each person
Or accused of even considering subversion.
as to whom there is reasonable ground to believe probably will engage in certain future acts of sabotage.
From this nightmarish piece of legislation, I devised the idea of punishment parks.
The President today signed an executive order calling to immediate duty 100,000 reservists.
The premise is a near-future America. The Vietnam War has expanded. Prisons are at capacity, and so Nixon has invoked emergency powers. So we have activists, draft dodgers, civil rights organisers. Anyone the state considers to be a threat is rounded up and brought before a tribunal.
That we have with us at this time, television film cameras of the national network, also those of Britain and West Germany.
The tribunals offer a choice. You can serve your sentence, which will be long, or you can enter Punishment Park, a stretch of Californian desert. Prisoners have 3 days to walk 53 miles to an American flag, without water or food, pursued by armed National Guardsmen and police. If they reach the flag, they're free. However, nobody has ever reached the flag.
What were you charged with?
Refusing induction.
The film runs 2 groups simultaneously.
Charge 3, conspiracy to aid and abet others in the unlawful flight to avoid the draft.
Group 637 is being processed through the tribunal. We watch the hearings, a draft dodger, a young woman who's organised against the war, a Black Panther, a folk singer.
Songs you write.
What about them?
Those moral?
Yeah, I call them moral. I call them a lot more moral than what you're doing sitting right there. Fuck off.
They put forward their arguments, which are brilliantly articulated. However, it's clear that the tribunal has already made up its mind.
You're a crazy girl. You ought to be locked up.
I make you locked up. Why should I be locked up? Why don't you shoot
Because
me?
you're a schizophrenic. You're cuckoo.
The other group, 638, is already in the desert. We watch them argue about their strategy.
Let's get going. Get the fuck out of here.
Going where?
Let's try to make it to the flag.
How the hell are we gonna make it somewhere? We don't have no water.
They believe, against all available evidence, that if they play by the rules, they'll be rewarded. The system will play fair.
They're gonna kill you before they kill us.
See that? That's what'll kill us.
The camera crew moves between both groups, becoming increasingly desperate and entirely powerless to intervene. It's a bit like the Hunger Games, but on a come down.
How would you try and remedy what's happening in America?
I don't think it can be done. I think it just got to evolve out of it.
The film looks like news footage because it was designed to be mistaken for news footage, and it's remarkably effective.
And it'll happen, and I think it'll happen violently.
Handheld cameras, direct address to lens, interviews conducted in the middle of action, there's breaks in speech cadence, overlapping arguments, and there's nothing here that feels conventional.
Should you resist the arrest, or should any of you adopt violence in any form?
Audiences genuinely struggled to process what they were watching.
In short, you can start the violent actions if you so choose, but I assure you that we will finish them.
And of course that confusion's the point. Stumble across this film without knowing anything about it, and you believe it was reality.
I believed in this, and it's simple and quite plain, that when fired upon, I believe in firing back.
If you can't tell whether this is real, then you've already been seduced by Watkins' thesis. He's showing you that the documentary format is not a neutral vehicle for truth, but a construction that can be weaponized, that the camera doesn't protect anyone. And so this is an extension of the Guy Debord concept that I discussed in the They Live video. Watching is not the same as acting.
I think that people become violent when they are deprived of their basic human needs.
Punishment Park screened at Cannes in 1971. It screened at the New York Film Festival in October of the same year, where it was heavily attacked. Hollywood studios, not surprisingly, declined to distribute it.
A major component of our democratic society.
For most people, pretty much ever since, it simply doesn't exist, which is a travesty.
Comes from the preamble to the Constitution, which states that an individual is guaranteed the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? The rights to life.
It was never banned. There's no record of any formal suppression, of any government intervention or legal action.
I just ignored the letter.
The film was just ignored.
Just didn't do anything.
The philosopher Bernard Stiegler wrote about what he called the industrialization of memory. The process by which the technologies of recording and broadcast don't preserve experience, but instead replace it. You don't remember the event, you remember the footage. And when the footage stops circulating, the event stops existing in any meaningful cultural sense. That's not conspiracy. It's simply the logic of the attention economy. Watkins understood that.
I don't give a good goddamn where it goes.
And France and Germany.
Think about what happened to COVID. We had 3 years of a collective trauma, hundreds of thousands of deaths, economies ruined and impacts that'll last for decades. And then when it was finished, nothing. There was no reckoning, no real investigation, and nobody's been held to account. Also, nothing has become the defining work that it should have produced.
Just follow the money.
There is no All the President's Men, there's no margin call or inside job.
It wasn't brains that got me here, I can assure you of that.
The news cycle has simply moved on, and we've let it. Because of course, the algorithm needs fresh content. What Watkins understood, and what we now live inside, is the condition in which the mechanism breaks down entirely. Because the interval between events has collapsed.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. Of Venezuela, in Iran.
See, people can't interrogate something outlandish, illegal, or stupid.
I doubled the size of it, you dumb person.
If you immediately replace it with something else, which is equally outlandish, illegal, or stupid.
You are not a smart person.
And the news cycle not only rewards that, but we demand it.
You are not a smart person.
Punishment Park was made to show that vacuum. It described the empty space.
Do you condone the war in Vietnam, sir? Pardon me? Do you condone the war in Vietnam?
And then it fell into it and disappeared for 30 years.
Because it's protecting our country. And who tells you this?
Would you like us to have them come over here and fight us? Would you fight them?
Who tells you that this war is protecting your country?
We're focused on delivering for the American people, on safeguarding their security, on protecting their economic interests.
This film should be compulsory viewing in 2026. It's one of the few films that still feels genuinely dangerous.
Tell me, what is your philosophy of government? What do you believe in?
I would take every single man that isn't in this country, that's in a uniform in another country where he doesn't belong, and bring him back home and take him out of his uniform and put him back in the world.
It's more prescient now than ever, and it deserves to be seen by as many people as possible.
This is a Remington Wingmaster Model 870 shotgun, 12 gauge.
What about the corruption? What about the police brutality? What about the oppression of the minority groups that this country is?
One good thing about the world in 2026 is that you can watch Punishment Park whenever you want. No one can bury it. No one can bury any film that challenges the orthodox thinking.
What? I am not immoral, Mrs. Juergens. You want to know what's immoral? Do you want me to tell you what's immoral?
However, one bad thing about the world in 2026 is that no one is making films like Punishment Park anymore. And there's barely any appetite to watch the ones that we already have.
War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral.
See, it's easy to ignore something if it doesn't exist.
Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral.
And if your audience is already distracted, you don't need to be a very good magician.
It's loaded with double-aught buckshot.
When are we gonna have love? When are we gonna have brotherhood, huh? We're not, as long as there's this little fucking Hitler.
Each individual cartridge has 9 ball bearings in it.
And you're sending all the oppressed people to their death! Don't you know that? Are you that fucking stupid?
Another outburst and you'll be taken for an accord.